Hello, dear students. Welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy. Today is 23rd April 2024, and we have few important articles from the Hindu newspaper, and we will discuss all of those articles in a very detailed manner. So before discussing them, let's try to solve yesterday's practice question. So the question was, which of the following statements about the pink bollworm is correct? The first statement, it is a type of fungus that affects cotton plants. It is a beneficial insect that aids in pollination. Third statement says it is primarily feeds on the seeds and balls of cotton plants. And fourth statement says it is a marine organism found in oceans and seas. So the correct answer for this question is option C, because pink bollworm is actually an insect which feeds on seeds and balls of the cotton plants. And in fact, the pink bollworm is one of the most destructive pest species on the cotton plants. So this is how the pink bollworm affect the cotton balls. Pink bollworm is actually an insect, so that is a pest in cotton farming. Now, if you can understand the cotton farming in India, cotton is widely grows in the black soils, and black soils are mostly located in the Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and parts of the Telangana region. So those are the regions where the cotton is highly cultivated. However, the problem is that cotton crop or cotton plantation comes under the influence of the pink bollworm insect. So this pink bollworm insect heavily feeds on the cotton balls and destroying the cotton crop. So that has been significantly reducing the yield of cotton. So in order to deal with the pink bollworm insect, we have introduced BT cotton variety. So that is Bacillus thuringiensis cotton variety in agriculture. So this BT cotton is actually resistant to this insect species, resistant to the pink bollworm species. So it is not just resistant to pink bollworm insect, but at the same time the BT cotton had significantly increased the cotton yield in the Indian agriculture sector, so thereby benefiting the farmers through the secured income for the farming community. So however, one disturbing trend with respect to the BT cotton is that the pink bollworm is actually started developing resistance, and if it started developing resistance, it would also infect the BT cotton plantation. So therefore, there is a potential consequence of declining the crop yield if the BT cotton, if the pink bollworm insect species develops resistance. Please also understand, BT cotton is the only genetically modified crop variety that is introduced in India. Even though there were BT mustard, BT brinjal varieties, they have not yet given the approval for the large scale commercial cultivation in India. So if you look at some details with respect to the BT cotton, it is native to Asia but has become invasive species. So invasive species are those species which are not native to one particular ecosystem. So however, if those species introduced any new ecosystem, either intentionally or unintentionally, those species became invasive species because they destroy the native and endemic ecosystems, and those species are invasive species. Here this pink bollworm is also an insect species, and it is actually considered as the most destructive pest on the cotton crop worldwide. So this is with respect to the pink bollworm insect. So today's prelims practice question, consider the following statements about the model code of conduct. Statement 1, the model code of conduct comes into force from the date the election schedule is announced until the date that results are out. Second statement, it has no statutory backing. So which of the statements above are correct? So please answer this question, because model code of conduct we have discussed earlier also several lectures. So please answer this question in the comment section, and the correct answer I'll be providing you at the in the next lecture. So the first important editorial that is given in the Hindu newspaper is with respect to the earth and restoring earth's good health. This was the editorial that is given in the Hindu newspaper. So please understand the context of this particular editorial. So the context is that now earth has been facing a lot of challenges. So the environmental challenges, resources degradation, contamination and pollution. So they have been constantly degrading the planetary health. Recently, International Mother Earth Day was celebrated. Okay, so the idea of this Mother Earth has been embedded in India's culture and traditions. Now, if you can look at India's culture and tradition, we look at our planet as a Mother Earth. So it has been embedded in our cultures and traditions since centuries. Okay, so nature is also considered as a living entity rather than just a resource. Because please understand, if you can go back to the Indus Valley civilization times, the IVC times, the people of Indus Valley civilization actually worshipped Mother Goddess in in a raw form. So that is how we have embedded Mother Earth as a as a source of or as a living entity rather than just a resource. So therefore, our Indian culture and traditions respect the Mother Earth or values Mother Earth. However, recently we all aware about the Supreme Court's judgment with respect to the climate change. So the judicial pronouncements and observations that attempt to bring the impact of climate change within the purview of constitutional fundamental rights. Okay, so recently what Supreme Court has said? The Supreme Court has said that people have the right to be free from the adverse impacts of climate change. Now, as I can tell you that climate change is a challenge. So therefore, climate change has resulted in changing the lives of the people. It has been adversely affecting the lives of the people. So in order to recognize the adverse impact of climate change on the lives of the people, what the Supreme Court has done? Supreme Court of India has recognized such adverse effect of climate change, citing Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, that is right to equality before law and equal protection of laws, and Article 21 also. So that talks about right to life and personal liberty of the Indian Constitution as the sources. Okay, so climate change in fact violates Article 14 of the Indian Constitution and Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, and briefly this is what the Supreme Court has said. So this essentially means that every person has the right to live with the clean environment. So right to live in an environment which is free from the adverse effects of climate change, and this is what the judicial pronouncement of the Supreme Court actually mean. However, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has also given a message during the International Mother Earth Day 2024. So his message was humanity was acting like a Mother Earth's delinquent child. We depend on nature, yet we have brought chaos into the natural world. So these actions harm nature, they harm humanity. Together we must restore the harmony with the nature. And this is what is evident from the recent rise in the global pandemics that we have been observing across the world. So not just pandemic, whatever limited resources we have been contaminating and polluting those resources. And climate change has been significantly posing new challenges to our existence. So therefore, in this particular context, the UN Secretary General has held that we must restore the harmony with the nature. So that is, in a way, we live in harmony with the nature. We must proceed, or we must be guided towards the sustainable development, and at the same time we must follow the One Health approach that was given by World Health Organization. One Health approach that was given by the World Health Organization. So however, India remains highly vulnerable to the climate change and the negative consequences of climate change. There is no doubt about that, because we have a huge coast, and apart from huge coast, we have significant number of population who are depending on the agriculture sector directly and indirectly, and this agriculture sector is highly vulnerable to the climate change and the negative impacts that are being associated with the climate change. And at the same time, the growing heat wave like conditions, and these heat waves impacting the informal workforce, and not just informal workforce, it has been reducing their livelihoods and impacting their livelihoods, reducing the productive capacities. Overall, if you can understand, India's economy is 80%, 85% of its total workforce is in the informal sector. So informal sector is highly vulnerable to the heat wave like conditions. So therefore, there is also a chance of reducing the level of economic growth and economic development in India due to the adverse impact of the climate change and associated events. So after that, we have a huge coast, and that coast is surrounded by Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. However, the problem is that the cyclone intensity and the frequency has been increasing. If I can provide you one example, that is cyclone Amphan. So cyclone Amphan is one such example. Cyclone Hudhud is also another example. So therefore, a country like India is highly vulnerable to the climate change. So more than 80% of India's population lives in districts that are at a higher risk of the climate induced disasters that I've already discussed about all those disasters. However, one shocking data is that 80% of India's population are at a risk of adverse impacts of the climate change. However, so if you look at India's efforts, India's commitments to reduce the climate change, to reduce global warming, on its part, India had made certain nationally determined contributions. Okay, so nationally determined contributions are actually the goals that India announces to reduce the emissions over a period of time. Okay, so in this image you can see the nationally determined contributions of India, that is 33 to 35% emission intensity reduction by 2030 over 2005 levels. And secondly, total renewable energy capacity at 175 gigawatt by 2022, and 40% of total power from non-fossil fuel sources. Increase the forest cover to sequester 2.5 to 3 ton of carbon dioxide. Need to drive higher investments in health, agriculture and water. Total cost of meeting NDCs US dollars 2.5 trillion till 2030. Now understand one thing here, how forests sequester the atmospheric carbon. So we all knew that the trees or plants absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and they release oxygen into the atmosphere. So they require carbon dioxide for the purpose of photosynthesis. So while they undergo photosynthesis, they store this carbon in their roots, in their stem and branches, leaves. So all the trees would store a huge amounts of carbon themselves. So therefore, they play a very important role in absorbing the atmospheric carbon and reducing the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So therefore, we can say that the forests are one of the most effective natural sink of the carbon dioxide. So however, if you look at India's status in achieving all these targets, India had made a rapid strides in decoupling the emissions from the economic growth. And apart from that, India already achieved 2 of the nationally determined contributions. So out of all these nationally determined contributions, India already achieved 2 of the nationally determined targets. So first target would be reducing the emission intensity of its GDP by 33 to 35% of 2005 level. This target was achieved by India. And secondly, achieving 40% cumulative electricity power installed capacity from the non-fossil fuel sources. So they were achieved well ahead of the 2030. So this indicates India has been making a lot of positive strides in achieving the nationally determined targets. And at the same time, India has also been rapidly increasing its renewable energy generation capacities, and that is being evident from this data. So however, we must accelerate the climate action on both the demand side and the supply side also. See, I've told you that climate change is a challenge, there is no doubt about that. But in order to deal with the climate change, we must take the climate action. We must look for the climate action, and the climate action need to be taken on both demand side and supply side as well. So when we look at the demand side of the climate change, we need to invoke a more rights-based approach to climate action. Now, rights-based action to the climate change actually means recent Supreme Court judgment that Article 14 and Article 21 climate change actually violates Article 14 and Article 21 of the Constitution. So that is the demand side climate action. So that is the rights-based approach to the climate action. And when we talk about the supply side approach to the climate action, so we need to encourage the integrated approach and actions between the government, private sector and the civil society. So that essentially means a holistic approach, an integrated approach. So that is the supply side approach, and they form the crux of climate action in any country, especially a country like India. So after that, out of all states that we have totally and union territories, 18 are classified as moderately highly vulnerable to the climate change. So 18 states moderately high vulnerability to climate change is actually a big number for us, and a large number of people are vulnerable to the risks of climate change. So therefore, what should be the way forward for us? What measures or what steps we must undertake to reduce the vulnerabilities to climate change? We must build the interministerial and intersectoral approaches. They are very, very important, because these interministerial and intersectoral approaches, the interministerial intersectoral collaborations, what they would do is that they achieve the resource use efficiency. Whenever we are undertaking a concerted climate action, then we must ensure that the resources use efficiency plays a very important and a very prominent role here. So for that particular purpose, these collaborations are very important. And one such example was One Health approach that was launched by the World Health Organization, and Government of India has also launched One Health Mission, National One Health Mission. So this National One Health Mission would look for the three aspects. So that is human health, environment health, and also the animal health, to ensure the environmental sustainability and at the same time the pandemic, or to prevent pandemics like COVID-19. Okay, so this One Health initiative or National One Health approach by the Government of India actually bring together 13 ministries and departments in the domains of health, environment, science and technology for disease control, research and pandemic preparedness. Okay, so that is the example of collaborations between different ministries and different sectors. Apart from that, we must leverage the court's observation to empower the citizens groups and at the same time the civil society, because citizen groups and civil society organizations actually play a very important role in fostering the rights-based dialogue on environment, biodiversity and the climate action. So therefore, we must empower these organizations at the grassroots level. And apart from that, we must adopt an overarching regulation on climate change, because the regulation within the sphere of climate change plays a very important role. So regulation prevents excessive exploitation of existing and scarce natural resources. The regulation ensures the sustainable use of those resources, and the regulation prevents contamination and pollution of existing precious resources. So therefore, an overarching regulation on climate change takes into account or takes forward the policy driven approach for climate action. And this overarching regulation has the intended benefits of enhancing the state capacities by driving allocation of funds, functions and the functionaries. So these are the measures that must be undertaken in order to ensure that we fulfill our climate goals and climate objectives and reduce India's vulnerability to the negative impacts or risks of climate change. And after that, recently Taiwan was hit by an earthquake. And in this article, the author has been discussing about what are the major reasons of earthquake in Taiwan, and what are the major reasons why Taiwan has seen such a massive earthquake. And apart from that, the author has also been talking about how Taiwan is prepared to deal with the earthquake. So that has significantly reduced its vulnerability to the earthquake. And thirdly, what are the lessons that India can learn from Taiwan in order to deal with the earthquakes? Because understand, India also has certain regions which are vulnerable to the earthquakes. So therefore, the author of this editorial has been discussing all these three factors. Now firstly, understand what exactly is the earthquake. So earthquake is actually shaking of the earth's surface, so that is known as the earthquake. So it is also called as a quake, a tremor, a trembler. So that is actually the sudden shaking of the earth's surface, and that has been resulting due to the sudden release of energy in the lithosphere, and that creates these seismic waves. So please understand, if you look at the composition of the earth, so we have atmosphere, the lithosphere, the solid part, the lithosphere and the hydrosphere. So the water component is known as hydrosphere, and earth's crust and upper mantle is known as the lithosphere, and the atmosphere above the crust. So therefore, the sudden release of energy in the lithosphere, this part, okay, in the lithosphere, that creates the seismic waves, and that results in the earthquake of any area. So please understand, in a very simple terms, earthquake means the sudden shaking of the earth's surface area because of the release of energy in the lithosphere. However, there are 4 different types of earthquakes. What are those 4 different types? The first type is a tectonic origin earthquake, and second type is a volcanic origin, third collapse and explosion. So all these 3 factors contribute to the earthquake, formation of earthquakes. For example, if there is any explosion took place, so that could result in sudden shaking of earth's surface. Now the tectonic movement, because we have different plates, the Indian plate collided with the Eurasian plate, the Indian plate collided with Eurasian plate, and this has resulted in the formation of the fold mountains. They are known as Himalayas. So therefore that region in and around Himalayas is also vulnerable to the tectonic earthquakes. Secondly, volcanic based earthquakes. For example, the Pacific Ring of Fire across the Pacific Ocean is vulnerable to the volcanic origin earthquakes and tsunamis. In case any collapse took place of a large scale structure, that could also result in earthquakes. However, understand the meaning and definition of a tectonic earthquake as I have already told you. So it is one that occurs when Earth's crust breaks due to the geological forces. Okay, so for example, this is Earth's crust, and the Earth's crust is Earth's crust breaks due to the geological forces, and that is known as the tectonic earthquake. So because we have several minor plates and major plates, so across the surface, both ocean surface as well as the crustal surface, and that could cause physical and chemical changes, and the plate movements contribute to the tectonic earthquakes. Now in this context, an earthquake is usually distinguished by the name of the town. So how earthquakes are named? Earthquakes is distinguished by the town, the province or the country near or within which the earthquake had originated, and it's by its date. Okay, so the double nomenclature serving to determine its position in space and time. So the double nomenclature of any earthquake actually helps us understand where it took place, at what time it took place, and if there is any other earthquake, then we could name it, so we possibly avoid confusion with respect to identifying the regions which are already struck by these deadly earthquakes, so that the relief and rescue teams or efforts can be undertaken without any confusion. And that is the purpose of naming any earthquakes with the town name or province name or state or country's name if any earthquakes immediately takes place. Now in this context, please understand that so the region where earthquakes origins is known as hypocenter, and the direct or straight line above the surface is called as epicenter. So this is hypocenter, the region where earthquake originates, and epicenter is the region straight to the origin place or straight to the hypocenter on the surface of the crust. However, in the last 2 decades, so major earthquakes have been occurred across different parts of the world. So the countries include Indonesia had seen an earthquake, Japan, China, Italy, Nepal, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Ecuador, Mexico, Morocco, and Turkey Syria border, so that we have observed in the year 2023. So all these parts have seen earthquakes with major or minor a frequency or intensity. However, on April 3rd, there was a 7.4 magnitude earthquake that struck Taiwan. So these earthquakes cannot be treated as a random occurrences. Okay, so they are not a random events that are taking place and that have been creating a huge destruction across different parts of the world. Rather, these earthquake prone regions are very often share some tectonic similarities that we must understand, because understanding tectonic similarities will help us understand the vulnerability of any region to the earthquakes. So therefore, earthquakes occur in certain regional bands. So they include the spatial distribution. So the distribution of this earthquake vulnerability or distribution of earthquakes across different regions of the world is explained by the theory of plate tectonics. So this theory of plate tectonics actually means that there are different plates across the world, and these plates are moving at a constant speed. Now, for example, if you look at the Indian plate, so this Indian plate is actually colliding with the Eurasian plate. Eurasian plate. So this has resulted in a tectonic origin earthquakes in and around the Himalayan region. Because of that reason, Nepal is more vulnerable to earthquakes, and northeast India is also vulnerable to earthquakes. Afghanistan is also facing the highest vulnerability of the earthquakes because of the tectonic activity, because of the plate movements in the northern part of our country. Okay, so this actually explains the Earth's outermost layer, that is crust. So it is also known as lithosphere, and it is broken into 15 major fragments or plates. So on the surface of the Earth, or on the lithosphere part of the Earth, there are 15 different plates which are moving at a constant speed, and they are colliding with each other. So when these plates have been, you can see in this image, so when you see that these plates, when they're moving towards each other, they collided with each other, right? So this plate has beneath the another plate. Okay, so this has resulted in the formation of mountains, and these mountains are known as the fold mountains, and this is how Himalayas were formed. So these were known as fold mountains. Okay, so this is the continental crust, and this is lithosphere and asthenosphere and ancient oceanic crust. So this is why the powerful earthquakes are concentrated along the convergent plate boundaries. For example, if you look at this one, this is known as the convergent plate boundaries. Now apart from that, there are also the divergent plate boundaries. So they move apart from each other. Divergent plate boundaries are also vulnerable to the earthquakes. So after divergent, convergent vulnerables, convergent plate movement and divergent plate movement. So both these types are major causes of earthquakes. Okay, so Himalayas, we can see this convergent movement of plates, tectonic plates. Okay, convergence of Indian plate with the Eurasian plate has resulted in or making the Himalayan region more vulnerable to the earthquakes. However, if you look at the Taiwan region, the Philippine Sea plate is moving towards the northeastern side or northwestern side, towards the Eurasian plate. Okay, so see, imagine that so Philippines is located somewhere here. So the Philippines sea plate is moving towards the northwestern side, and somewhere in this place there is Taiwan, and China is located in the Eurasian plate. Okay, so when the Philippines sea plate is moving towards the northwestern side, towards this Eurasian plate, so at a speed of 7.8 centimeters per year. So this is the speed at which the Philippine sea plate is moving towards the Eurasian plate towards China. Okay, so it is also said that the movement of this plate is even faster than the movement of the Indian plate towards the Eurasian plate. Movement of Indian plate towards the Eurasian plate. So this Taiwan is located 160 kilometers from China, and Taiwan is also formed at the convergent plate boundary. Taiwan is actually formed because of the convergent plate boundary. Philippines and the Eurasian plates on the Western Pacific Ocean, and it is a country of strong earthquakes. So because of Taiwan formed as a result of convergent plate boundaries between Eurasian plate and the Philippines sea plate, Taiwan is more vulnerable to the earthquakes. However, here one thing we must understand, that earthquake preparedness of Taiwan. Okay, so it is one of the most advanced in the world, the earthquake preparedness of the Taiwan. And apart from that, the island nation has the most advanced earthquake monitoring network and early warning systems, right? So it possesses all those things. However, along with the above mentioned efforts, Taiwan has also taken number of measures to further rapidly increase their awareness, or it has conducted the awareness campaigns and drills on the safety about the public in case of any earthquake that took place, so that could largely reduce the vulnerability of people to for the earthquakes. Okay, and in fact the government also constantly provide updates on the earthquake safety requirements and new and existing building stock, and incentivizes the citizens or residents, offering them subsidies to improve the quake resistance of the buildings. Okay, so the earthquake resistance of the building. So if any building so which has taken into consideration the earthquake vulnerability and constructed buildings with quake resistant quake resistant technologies, then the government would incentivize those buildings, those people. And apart from that, there will be specific seismic codes also, and they can be designed and construction norms can be followed. And it could also use new technologies such as seismic dampers, base isolation systems. All those things certainly help in meeting the earthquakes more efficiently and effectively by the Taiwan. However, India is also going through the major phase of infrastructure expansion, right? So we are also planning to expand our infrastructure, especially in the tectonically unstable regions. So tectonically unstable regions include the Himalayas and the northeastern India. However, sometimes we have seen the violation of existing norms with respect to the building codes over the construction of buildings in these regions. However, in the ecological sensitive areas. So therefore, earthquake sensitivity or earthquake safety should be a particular concern for us, and all infrastructure projects must comply with the safety regulations and safety norms. And in this context, we must learn something from the earthquake preparedness of Taiwan, because a country like India, which is heavily populated and higher population density, in case of any earthquake took place, because of poor construction standards and norms, so that could result in a large scale destruction. So therefore we must follow the norms strictly, so that will help us reduce our vulnerability to the earthquakes. Please also remember, India is one of the highly vulnerable country to the earthquakes also. And after that, we must understand this Taiwan earthquake has actually provided some important lessons for India also. So these include the seismic codes must be formulated, constructing the safer engineered structures should be a norm, and overcoming the inadequacies in the enforcement and non-compliance of the seismic codes must be treated as a violation of law. They must be punished. So all those things must be inculcated in India's earthquake preparedness, and that is how we can reduce our vulnerability to the earthquakes. So these codes unique to a particular region and are prepared based on the local earthquake activity. Okay, so the building codes, construction materials, so everything are followed the local codes. So currently India follows IAS 1893 specifies. So this IAS 1893 actually specifies the seismic designs which are based on the seismic zonation maps, so that buildings do not collapse easily. And apart from that, India traditional architectural style possessing the earthquake resistivity, so that can be discovered and encouraged also. So we have the traditional structures, and those traditional structures are not vulnerable to the earthquakes. So therefore we must understand the technology that is involved behind this traditional architectural resistivity, and we must undertake the concerted actions regarding this. So this is what the author has been explaining. On this image you can see the vulnerability of different regions to earthquakes. So the region which is marked in red color has the highest vulnerability to the earthquakes, followed by the zone 4 and zone 3 and zone 2. So zone 2 is the least vulnerable to the earthquakes. Okay, so all these regions are least vulnerable to the earthquakes, but zone 5 is the highest vulnerability to the earthquakes. And after that, So there is also some news about the star campaigners amid this general elections. So now we'll also understand who are these star campaigners. Star campaigners in political parties. Okay, so recently, why it is in context, recently Sunita Kejriwal, she was the wife of Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, was appointed as a star campaigner by the Aam Aadmi Party for its campaign in the state of Gujarat. So we'll understand this. Who is a star campaigner? So star campaigner is actually a famous personality, and that particular personality must have a huge fan base, and this person must be chosen by the political party to either contest or campaign during elections on behalf of the political party which is appointed those star campaigners. So these star campaigners can be any person, whether he can be a political heavyweight, he can be a sports or film star, or any other celebrity. Even a sports person can also be declared as a star campaigner by the political party. However, there must be certain norms, so they should be followed here. So one is that they are nominated by the concerned political parties. Okay, for example, if there is a party A and this party A appoints a star campaigner Z. Okay, so the star campaigner must be appointed or nominated by the party A or concerned political party, and it should also specify their constituencies and duration of their status with respect to the campaigning. And after that, in India, there is no law which has been governing who I'm sorry. So in India, there is no law which has been governing who can or who cannot made a star campaigner. So there is no such law. Even Representation of People Act is also not talking about this. So after that, the only requirement to become a star campaigner is that these persons have to be the members of the political party that appoints them. So in case party A appoints Z as a star campaigner, the Z must be part of the, or he must be, a member of a political party A. So that are some rules and norms with respect to the appointment of star campaigners. So how many star campaigners can be appointed by a political party? So in fact, section 77 of the Representation of People Act 1951, what it tells. So section 77 tells that a recognized political party, whether the national party or the state party, they can appoint around 40 star campaigners for each of those party. Okay, so however, there are certain registered political parties, but they are unrecognized political parties because of a lesser vote share. So they can appoint up to 20 star campaigners. Since they have got a lesser vote share, so they should have only 20 star campaigners. But on the other hand, the recognized and registered political parties can have around 40 star campaigners. So that is what is mandated by section 77 of the Representation of the People Act. However, the names of the star campaigners must be communicated to the Election Commission and Chief Electoral Officer of the states within 7 days from the date of notification of the such elections. Okay, so within 7 days, the political parties must forward the names of the star campaigners to the Election Commission of India and Chief Electoral Officer of the concerned state. So in case of a multi-phase election is being conducted, like a general election that is conducted, that is going to be conducted by the Election Commission, the political parties can submit a separate list of star campaigners for different phases. So what are the benefits on expenditure incurred by the leaders of political party or star campaigners or a candidate? So what are some details about the expenditure of a candidate during the elections? So the Representation of People Act 1951 says that the Election Commission has fixed 95 lakh expense limit for a candidate of a bigger Lok Sabha constituency and 75 lakh expenditure or expenses by candidates with a smaller constituencies. And apart from that, the political parties actually cover all costs of the star campaigners, but star campaigners expenses are actually not deducted from the candidate's expenditure. So they will be not deducted, rather the star campaigners expenses will also be included as part of the expenses that are permitted by the Election Commission of India. So this allows candidates extra spending opportunity beyond the poll panel 75 to 95 lakh limit for the Lok Sabha polls. And after that, the star campaigners would be vote fetchers, because they have a huge fan following and they can influence and mobilize the voters. So these star campaigners are very often vote fetchers for the candidates set up by the respective parties, so without affecting the expenditure limit of the candidates. So this essentially means that whatever expenses which are being incurred on these star campaigners would not form part of the expenditure limit set by the Election Commission of India. Okay, so these are star campaigners. And the next important news article is with respect to recent Supreme Court judgment on leave to a working woman who is a mother. The Supreme Court clearly said that denying leave to a woman or denying leave to a mother to child care is actually a violation of the fundamental rights. Because understand, there are a lot of working mothers and they also have the responsibility of child care. Okay, so in early stage of the child. So if any company or any employer denied to provide leave to a mother for the purpose of child care would actually violates the fundamental rights of the mother and child. This is what the Supreme Court has said. So Supreme Court has said that denying child care leave, so this leave is known as child care leave, denying child care leave to the working mothers of disabled children actually violated the constitutional mandate for equal participation of women in the workforce. Now, the significance of child care leave, what is the significance? In fact, it is considered as the constitutional right or constitutional entitlement. Constitution has provided this child care leave to the working woman. The bench of the Supreme Court has actually emphasized on the participation, the importance of the participation of women in the workforce. And it is not just a matter of privilege but a constitutional entitlement under Article 15 of the Indian Constitution. So the Supreme Court has actually included Article 15. Now Article 15 talks about discrimination. So there should be a no discrimination, race, caste, sex and place of birth against any citizen of this country. That is what Article 15 of the Indian Constitution says. So Supreme Court has actually invoked Article 15 of the Indian Constitution, and followed by that, Supreme Court has also said the denial of child care leaves is the violation of the constitutional mandate, because it is an important constitutional right that women enjoy, and denying the same constitutional right to the mothers of a children, particularly with the disabilities, children with the disabilities, would violate the constitutional duty to ensure equal women opportunities or equal women participation in the workforce. So this is what the significance of the child care leaves for the working woman, especially children with disabilities, mothers of children with disabilities. So there are certain barriers addressed by this particular ruling of the Supreme Court, and one such barrier was the systematic barriers that still prevalent in the society. So at its core, the ruling of the Supreme Court actually addresses the systematic barriers which are being faced by women in balancing the professional careers, caregiving duties, particularly when they have children with the disabilities. And after that, gender disparity and undermined children's rights. So how gender disparities have actually undermined the children's rights? Because denying the child care leaves by the employers to these mothers have not only perpetuated the gender disparities in the workforce but also undermines the rights of children with disabilities, because they very often require adequate care and support from their parents. And in fact, the Supreme Court has also underscored the state's responsibilities and obligations with respect to the child care leaves, especially for mothers with the children with disabilities. So additionally, the ruling also emphasizes the obligation of state and employers to adopt policies that promote gender equality and also support the diverse needs of the working parents, so that including those children with disabilities. Now mostly the Supreme Court directive has actually emphasized on providing the child care leaves to mothers who have children with the disabilities. And if the employer, the private sector or the government sector or any other employer denied to provide child care leave to a mother with children with disabilities, would actually amounts to the violation of the fundamental rights and larger consequences would follow. However, this judgment has identified the responsibilities and the obligations of the state. It has addressed certain systematic barriers that are prevalent in the society and also the gender disparities that are existing and how these gender disparities have been undermining the children rights. Okay, so that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. Please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. We'll come up with a new articles in tomorrow's lecture, and thank you.